I think what excites us about the webinar series is the opportunity to have a conversation across the province with educators. And for me personally, it's exciting when we can have rural educators and urban educators come together to have a conversation about what matters in middle. We know our middle learners have slightly different needs and are in the world differently than some of our other levels. And so to have folks be able to come together and really embrace and discuss and be passionate about middle learners is really exciting as an opportunity.
I would say that this is our third year with the Middle Years series, webinar series, and we were ahead of the curve. We were online webinaring before COVID happened. And so in the first 2 years, we really looked at middle years philosophy and pedagogy, which is deeply diversity and identity oriented. And so really what's happening in this third year is we are making explicit our commitments to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so I think this is a real opportunity to engage folks, particularly rural folks who are my people, to be part of this really important conversation we believe in, but is often implicit. It's a chance to make this explicit in our practice.
There's nothing better than educators coming together and engaging in deep, rich, fun learning conversations. I hope that what we'll see is that educators use that energy to create learning environments where every single child is deeply honored and receives everything that they need to find success and create and thrive in their future.
I think Provincial Webinar Series 2 allows equity of access to quality professional learning and professional conversations across the province. I think some districts, based on size, have more opportunities to support powerful professional learning in their districts. And I think this is an opportunity to ensure equity of access to quality professional conversations and for us to grow and learn together.
I think it's also an opportunity to recognize that middle years learners are in every school district, regardless of how your school district is structured. And so we're connecting people who are teaching in elementary schools, middle schools, secondary schools, recognizing the unique opportunities for working with kids aged 10 to 14, and that how we teach should be connected to the life journeys and the contextual moments that these learners deserve, so that we're not teaching them as we teach other groups of kids, but recognizing the capacity for critical thinking and the passion these kids have because they're developing their interests in the world and their identities in terms of what they want, how they want to make a difference. We know that addressing agency within middle years learners helps them engage more, feel like they have more control in the world, and more importantly, realize that they can make a difference.
Do you think that this format also provides educators with the opportunity to make their learning fit their schedule, their group, their situation? I think, Tammy, that's kind of what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, I think it's so great because we have folks that can jump in on their own and then they participate in a group, or we have groups come together and they can facilitate a small group with their own setting. So there's so much flexibility. And then also we really appreciate that we can archive the sessions, and we've had lots of feedback where folks want to go back and they want to listen again, or they want to go deeper, or they want to have that conversation with colleagues. So I think the format allows for that in time all together, as well as that going deeper in our own context after, when folks want a little bit more time to kind of dig into the resource.
We are definitely countering isolation for those educators who want to be part of a conversation, but either because that's not what the topic is that their whole staff is focusing on this year, or in some cases, you're the only person teaching at that grade level in your school and maybe even in your community. And so it really allows you to be part of that community.
And the sharing of resources is amazing. Like we use a hashtag that allows for folks to share on Twitter, but the connections that we make across the province, I think, again, Leighton, as you say, allows folks to reach out and share things and inspire the work in different areas, because I agree, Leighton, sometimes people feel isolated. And so when they hear someone from a different community presenting on their just right topic or something that's super inspirational for them, it allows that greater connection and that opportunity to collaborate across districts.
One of the things I love too is that idea of, I get to show up without all the answers. I have something to offer, but we're going to be curious together and see where we can get to together. And I just think that's brilliant. And I'm personally looking forward to listening to educators, wrestle and remind each other about the great work. That's the other thing. Sometimes we feel it's so inadequate, and yet so much amazing work is happening.
I've been just delighted to maybe counter that deficit narrative regarding rural education and to feature the voices of rural educators from every corner of this province and have them share their really powerful work. And so what we're kind of doing is you're almost innovating on behalf of other people. And then you share in the webinar and you're thinking, that is super cool. I want to do what's happening in Sparwood, or what's our version of that that would make sense in Haida Gwaii? Or how do we think about this in Fort Nelson? Because we're really working really hard on executive functioning, but this also helps us think about co-teaching. And so hearing the voices and the really place-specific creativity that's happening and collaboration that's happening in different parts of the province really gives us a window into not doing what other people do, but thinking about what we can do in our place, with the land, on the land, learning from the land, with our local nations, recognizing that we need to be in relationship and in community in our place, and our places are special, but that we can also, by sharing our stories, inspire powerful things in other contexts.
I agree, because I know coming from not the biggest city, but still a bigger city, so much innovation happens in rural that I think plants really important seeds in Victoria, for example. So things that we may not have considered. There might have been forced innovation somewhere else that we can then take that innovation and say, how do we contextualize that within some of our bigger schools and our bigger settings? So it's always inspiring to see the work that's happening across the province.
It just is such a beautiful model for equity too, right? Elevating those voices that are often marginalized out in the rural areas where they're doing magnificent work because they have to, because there's no other way really sometimes, and then using that or inviting folks to learn from that. Like you said, Leighton, folks out in rural communities learning on behalf of really the rest of the sector.
What do you hope attendance will take away?
We have an amazing education system in BC, unless you're a child in care, you've got diverse abilities, or you're an Indigenous learner. And building on the strengths that we already have, we can do better so that every single child gets through school and retains all that curiosity and joy and sees a path forward to their future. One of the things that I've had the privilege of looking at is our provincial data, and it tells us that Indigenous learners are not being provided the supports they need to be successful. What I hope is that educators will come together and tackle this, have a conversation. What do we as educators, as a system, need to do better? What structures are getting in the way? What practices do we need to shift in order to create environments where our Indigenous learners and all learners are really successful?
We are ready for this conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion to be centered. We're going to center this conversation, which means we're going to decenter dominant ways of knowing. We've been really looking at equity-oriented pedagogies, but if we don't get explicit about marginalization and power and privilege within what we do, and think about how we disrupt what we do to explicitly make not just safe spaces, which is kind of like an idea to be troubled, but recognizing we need brave spaces. That for some individuals with different backgrounds and experiences and abilities, our spaces are always spaces that are stressful and worrying because they feel like they have to perform in a way and to an expectation that doesn't honor who they are, or where they're fitting themselves into that content. And so what we're doing this year, in partnership with the ministry and the Rural Education Advisory and SD61, is we are saying we're ready to really dig in here. We're ready to say, how do I make my space a place where every kid can grow from where they are? And we recognize the funds of knowledge that they bring and the funds of identity they have as the curriculum, as where we start, as the place to deepen and maybe even more consciously engage in decolonizing work.
We're really excited in Victoria to be able to extend the opportunity for this partnership to include the ministry, UBC, and the Rural Education Advisory. We've been hosting this webinar series with Leighton from Victoria, but the conversation's been so rich and we wanted to ensure the ability to sustain it over time. And so working together, we know we're able to enrich this opportunity and involve more folks in the conversation.